Alright, so let's talk. With the reveal of the Switch 2, it really got me thinking, this is the first console that I will be able to purchase and pre-order on my own. When the Switch 1 was originally announced and revealed and even came out, I was a 7th grader. I was about 12 or 13 years old in junior high, and now I am a sophomore in college, about to turn 21. So a lot has changed since then, and from then has also been my love of games. I have really just dove headfirst into the culture and history of video games, so I am going to share with you my favorite games at the moment. So just a little PSA before we get started. These are my favorite games and not games that I think are the best games. I think best games are games that review really high, that critics love, that fans love, and I think favorite games are just games that I personally enjoyed. So you're more than welcome to disagree with me, and you can air it out with me in the comments. These are just games that I personally really love playing. Alright, so number 10 at my list is Super Mario Odyssey. Now, I know for a lot of people that could easily be a number 1. However, the only reason it's ranked so low is I'm really not that much of a platformer fan. However, this is still a great game. Let me get into why. So, this is the first open world Mario. I mean, Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy all had parts of them that felt open world. However, this is the first time that as Mario, you had complete control of wherever you go. The new open world came arguably some of the best level designs. All the worlds felt so original to themselves and had secrets and multiple paths to take during your journey through that gave this game so many more hours of playtime. And just the concept alone that this game really brought. Each Mario game kind of brought a new concept, with the first concept for 64 just being a 3D Mario, with Super Mario Sunshine giving us FLUDD, and then Mario Galaxy putting us in space and adding gravity to the mix. I mean, Mario Odyssey's capture control with Cappy was really something that added a lot more to this game. The concept of capturing new and returning Mario enemies and using their abilities to traverse the world made this game feel like even so much more was possible. The ending alone on the moon, where you were controlling Bowser to escape and collapsing the world, was such a great touch. And if we're going to talk about level design, something that I want to throw in here real quick is just how much this game paid homage to all the people who've been playing Mario for a long time. New Donk City level alone is the reason that this is in the top 10. That festival was a love letter to Mario fans who've been playing the series for a long time, with Jump Up Superstar in the background, and you running through an old Donkey Kong themed level really was just the nice cherry on top that made this game the masterpiece that I believe it is. Alright, so now one of the games that really surprised me as I started really digging into video games was a lovely indie game called Stardew Valley. This game I found on the top of the bestsellers of the Nintendo Switch eShop for a long time. It dominated that downloads only slide for a long time. However, I was lucky enough to find it when it was on sale and I was working my first job, and it was on sale for half off, which I believe was like $14, $7. So I ended up just coughing over the money, and I was surprised at how addicted I got to this game. It's one of the most addictive games I've ever played. The feeling of needing to farm, fish, craft, and mine to complete the community center was something that really drove me to spend a ton of hours in this game. The biggest reason, in my opinion, to complete the community center wasn't for any physical reward that you got, but the feeling of making the townsfolk's lives a better place. And I think another reason to complete the community center was really what the game stood for, which was straying from that corporate and that fast lifestyle that JoJo represented. Another thing that really I think made this game stand out was just how well written it was. The characters in this game all felt fairly in-depth. They all had traits and very standout designs that made no two of them the same. They were all written well enough that you don't mind going out of your way to learn a little bit more and explore what they have to offer. It was something that I would go through the town looking for certain characters just because I liked them more than others. And there were characters that I didn't like, but the more I talked to them, I realized that they had a well-written backstory that made me like them. This game I thought really had a beautiful and very relevant message today, which was just the feeling of a nice and steady life where you build something and create something your own against a really corporate and fast-paced life. The origins of this game start with you ditching the never-ending grind of a corporate life to build your own farm from the dirt in a small town, leaving behind your fast-paced life in favor of a slower one where genuine connections really make your life worth living. And I think that is something that Stardew Valley really tackles well, is the small town feel, which is why that I placed it so highly on my top 10 list. Alright, with number 8, get ready to take your heart, because my number 8 is Persona 5 Royals. When this game came to the Switch, I'll admit I was a little skeptical of it. I really wasn't that much of a JRPG fan, and I really wasn't that much of a turn-based RPG fan, but this game alone really blew me away. I think just to start with, I'm a big story guy, and the story in this game was great. I mean, the story really boils down to you trying to change and save the corruption of the world that kind of screwed you over in the first place. Joker kind of gets wrongfully convicted of this crime that he was really in the right of, if you morally are looking at it, and gets sent away to start a new life and a new beginning. You end up making a bunch of friends along the way, way of living in this new town and find out that you have the power to change people's hearts. I think another thing that is really done well in this is that all the characters have their own motivation for joining your side and trying to help make the world a better place. They all are fairly well written, and they all have had the world go so wrong against them, yet they still feel the need to come up and do what's right and try to make the world a better place. I think that's a message that Persona 5 really portrays with a lot of dignity and strength, showing that these characters can move past what the world once did to scar them to really do their best. Something else that I really think Persona blows out of the water is just their style. The music in this game is like no other. I've even got songs on it on my personal playlist, which I don't usually do with video games. And another thing is the art style in this game. It is so expressive and so emotional. I think it's just really captivating, and it is so fun to watch and look at. Alright, so coming in at number 7 is a game that recently just topped my list, which is a game that I recently actually just got to play for the first time, and that is Metroid Prime. We all know that the remaster came out on Switch not too long ago, and I think that game was phenomenal. I own both the original on the GameCube and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes on the GameCube. They're both really fun and unsettling adventure games. I mean, the world is really intriguing to explore, but a little bit creepy. In fact, it kind of feels like you are alone, just in general, throughout this massive planet, which is something that the game really excels at. I mean, that's just a common thing for Metroid games. You really felt like you were the lone survivor in whatever happened. It kind of really gives you this one woman versus the world feeling, which Metroid does really well. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a big fan of how the lore is explained in this game, which is why it ranks so low in my list. I don't like having to read through a bunch of text documents just to understand what's happening and what has happened. However, the world building in this game alone is really good. You get into a planet that kind of feels like it is in ruins. There's nobody there really but you and just some bugs, some plants, and a few bosses. But the ruins of what were once there are very present. You've got everything from the labs with the Metroids to even just the Chozo ruins that are all around the game. I think really builds the atmosphere that something was here before you and something went wrong before you got here. Now, something that a bunch of Nintendo games do really well is just the ability to have a really fun boss. I don't think that there was any boss in this game that really felt like a drag to me. All of these had fun, puzzly aspects to them that once you felt like you solved it and you nailed it down, made the boss just that much more enjoyable to beat, which was really just the thing with this is you kind of progress along the game and get more abilities and really upgrade your suit to where it doesn't really feel like Samus is learning, but you're learning as well. This game felt a little hard to play at first, but then once you really get it down, it is really fluid to play, and it's just something that you can pick up easily and just nail. I also think that this is just a fun aside and the last thing I'll bring up, but this game I believe just has really great representation. I think women often kind of get forced into us as a protagonist, or that they're just really poorly written or overly sexualized. I think Samus is one of the exclusions from that. I think that this is just a badass bounty hunter that everybody wants to be and can see themselves as, and is honestly a great representation of what women should be more like in the video game world. Alright, I hope you like testing because this next game is full of it, and I hope you allow this next game. This is the Portal Companion Collection. Now, I know that's technically like 2 games in one, but this game really doesn't take that long to get through. Neither of them do. You can really get through them in a matter of like 2 days. It took me 2 afternoons to beat the series, but I believe that Portal is one of the greatest games of all time, and I could go on a whole rant about it, but here's why it's one of my favorites. I really think it had a really innovative gameplay mechanic with the portal gun. At the time, I mean, this was the early 2000s when it came out, and programming something like that was just a crazy task and triumph to be able to do. But on top of that, the way they implemented it was really good in the game as well. You had a bunch of level-like test chambers that were just really creative and slightly went up in difficulty each time. However, none of them felt too terribly easy, and none of them felt too terribly hard. So I really think that this is a game that everyone could get into. Where I think the series shines, though, is really in the second game. If I had to pick one out of the 2 to be my favorite, it's the second game. I think you need to play the first game first, though. The second game has a fun story, you learning more about the history of Aperture Labs, which is kind of this area that you're stuck in. And you're being assisted by GLaDOS, which is why I think you really need to beat the first game, is because you understand from the first game, she was your enemy and you basically killed her for, I think it's almost 50,000 years. You end up going through the chambers, you find out that GLaDOS is once a real person. With her help, you end up going all the way through Aperture Labs, through the back hallways and all these back forbidden areas for you to end up meeting Wesley and eventually escaping Aperture. However, the solo campaign wasn't just the only part of this game. This was the first time we had a co-op mode, which was phenomenal in Portal 2. The puzzles just got a little harder with a partner. However, it was never anything that was too difficult that I had to quit the game. It was just something that I could spend a lot of hours with a friend doing, and I was just sad about how short the game was. That when we came to the end, of course, we got to the huge finale that if you want spoilers, like hit the double tap to skip 10 seconds, but you find out that there's just tens of thousands of more other humans, and then you find out GLaDOS kills them within like a month. A favorite part of this game for me that that I'm going to add real quick is the moon scene. I think that this is a scene that hopefully isn't too spoilerish for you. At the end of the game, you are tricked by the final boss into trying to push this button to kill him. Well, that button ends up being booby-trapped and you get sent flying, but you see a hole and an opening to the moon, which you shoot your portal under the final boss and at the moon. Everybody gets sucked up into space. It is one of my favorite scenes that I've ever played through a video game. I think the thing that's most special about this scene is it wasn't just a one-off thing. This whole scene was foreshadowed throughout the entirety of the game. If you're listening to the logs throughout playing this game that were playing over the loudspeakers, you found out that stuff like the portal gun originated from moon rocks, and that even the gel originated from moon rocks, so the moon has kind of been foreshadowed throughout this entire game, just making it so satisfying that that's how you beat the final boss. So in our top 5 now, and coming in at my number 5 is a game I hold near and dear. Honestly, I've been a fan of this franchise since it started. That would be Splatoon 3. So I really enjoyed the gameplay and the concept of the game. I think Splatoon is known as one of the more successful recent first-party Nintendo games. But I think just the concept of it as a whole is such a Nintendo thing in the best ways possible. And what I mean by that is Nintendo is never going to release a first-person FPS or just a shooter game, which Splatoon is the perfect example of that. It's not just a first-person shooter game. The point of the game isn't to get kills or splats, as they're called in the game. The point of the game is to ink as much turf as you can as basically a turf war battle style. Yeah, you can kill or splat people, but that's not how you're going to win the game. I think that also the competitive nature of this game is one of the few times that Nintendo has really pushed and supported a competitive style of any game, but I think that this really showed where Nintendo's creativity can take something old, like the first-person shooters and just shooters in general, and really renovate it to make it something very unique and something very fun to play. I've got countless hours in Splatoon. Splatoon 3 is probably my favorite in the franchise right now, and I'm very excited to see what 4 has in store for us on the Switch 2. Another thing that I think was really good about Splatoon 3 in particular was the campaign. It was a lot of fun with traditional levels that kind of led you down the story of Grizzco being one of the last mammals, and you exploring what is essentially an abandoned kind of lab that has more implications on the Splatoon lore. My biggest complaint with Splatoon 2 and 1 was that there is really a good story in Splatoon if you dig into it, but it's kind of just hidden behind text documents and pictures and relics you find throughout the story. I think we just need to get more comfortable with actual cutscenes telling us what's going on, but that's coming from me, somebody who likes to actually just see what's going on in front of me and not read old documents telling me about it. Besides the campaign, the multiplayer of this game is really what shines, and whether you're playing campaign, or if you're playing their wave style salmon run, or even just turf wars, this game is something you can pour a bunch of hours into and not really get that bored of. Now coming in at number 4 is my most anticipated game of all time. That is Smash Bros. Ultimate. This game is probably the biggest love letter to video games and video game history as a whole. This is a game that I believe has brought so many different people together and has just a giant community that I have found personally to be so welcoming, and this game is just so stupid fun. This game was one of my most anticipated upon release. I was a big fan of the Wii U one, and I was a big fan of the 3DS one, so to finally get one on the Switch when I didn't have my Wii U or 3DS anymore was a big deal for me. On top of that, I got in late to the Smash Bros. Series. The 3DS and the Wii U were my first introduction to the game, so I have heard of players like Ice Climbers and Pokemon Trainer and even Solid Snake, but I'd never really seen them before. So for them to be introduced in this game was huge. On top of that, the roster in this game is actually really important. This game had somebody for everybody. And what I mean by that is if you're a Mario fan, you've got Mario. If you were a Sega fan back in the day, you've got Sonic. You're a grittier video game player who likes M-rated games, there's characters like Bayonetta and Solid Snake for you. If you like all the Pokemon series, there's a ton of Pokemon characters. There was third-party characters incredibly shown off through this. You had characters that broke Twitter like Steve, Sora, Banjo, so there really was somebody like for everybody. On top of that, just thinking about the release trailer for a new character, it wasn't just a trailer but an event that happened. I remember going onto YouTube and seeing an endless stream of just reactions to this. I remember I was checking the New York's Nintendo store to see how they were doing and to see what went down there when a new character got shown. I also have so many personal stories I could just tell with this game alone that I'm sure I will get to in a future video. Something interesting was I've been a huge Minecraft fan my entire life, so when Steve got announced, totally faked being sick to stay home from school to watch the trailer. Favorite memory for me, but this game means a lot to me, and I think that everybody can agree this is a fantastic fighter. Alright, so number 3 should come as no surprise if you're listening to me earlier. I'm a huge Minecraft fan, and I always have been. This game is very near and dear to my heart. It's actually one of the first video games that really got me into playing games in general, and more than a casual player. I remember getting it around like 2012, 2013 when I was like 8 or 9 and just being blown away by the ability that I could do anything. I had complete freedom of whatever I did. Which is actually why I would say that probably my favorite version of this game was the original Xbox 360 version. That version holds just such a special place in my heart. But the reason this game is so important to me especially is the expression of freedom. You could build whatever you want, you could break whatever you want. If you wanted to destroy your world, blow it all up, cover it in lava, it's your choice. If you wanted to build giant castles, empires, skyscrapers, you could do that too. there was no rules. It was up to you what you did. I also think that this game is very important for just how little restriction it has. It doesn't matter if you are an 8-year-old or a 40-year-old. It doesn't matter if you are white or black, male or female. Anybody can play this game and really enjoy it. And I think that the legacy that it has and that it continues to update and have such a strong player base just shows that that still holds up today. I think that in addition to this game really allowing freedom and allowing you to feel like you could do anything, what was more important was how it worked online. You could play with any of your friends anywhere, and this was one of the first real games that was testing cross-platform at such an early time. This is one of the only games on the Switch that was allowing cross-platform besides I think games like Fortnite at the time. So you could play Minecraft with your friends on your Xbox that were playing on their cell phone who couldn't afford a gaming console. Or if you had friends that really weren't into the Nintendo stuff, you could play with them on a PS4 or any forms of the Xbox, which I think was really something that just brought this community of video game players and enjoyers together. And I think Minecraft kicked ass at doing that. So before I get through 1 and 2, I think that I'm just going to go through a quick honorable mentions list. So a game that I have really enjoyed has been Star Fox 64. I am a very avid Star Fox enjoyer. I'm ready for a new game in the series. I was glad when we got the N64 emulation through the Nintendo Online system. However, I prefer to play it more natively on a 64. This is one of those games that really doesn't take that long to play and beat, but it's just a lot of fun baked into it, and I think that this is just a really well-made game. The cast of characters is cool. It's cool being in open space and then flying around with what is supposed to be your friends. You guys all communicating with each other and talking with each other, even if you do get yelled to do a barrel roll like 70 times. I just think it's one of those games that you can play, pick up, have a lot of fun, set down, and then pick up 2 months later and just still have an incredible amount of fun. One of my other favorite honorable mentions that almost made my top 10 list is Pokemon Legends Arceus. The big reason that this didn't make my top 10 list is honestly because there were too many bugs in this game that I think needed to be fixed before it could get my top 10. However, this was a great step for the Pokemon franchise, finally giving us that real open world feeling with the 360 camera, being able to let your Pokemon out whenever you want. There was no longer really the tall grass Pokemon. You just kind of saw Pokemon roaming the open wild, which was a really nice feeling. Being able to craft your own Pokeballs and all other items and supplies you needed while trying to catch every single Pokemon and battle every single Pokemon was a really nice touch that I think was just one step forward for this game and to show what might be coming next in the future. Alright, so a game that has made it into my honorable mentions and probably has some recency bias to it is Sonic X Shadows Generations. Now, to be honest, Sonic Generations was an okay game. It's just a compilation of some of the better 3D Sonic levels and some good 2D Sonic levels. However, Shadow Generations is where this game really stands out. I think that the gameplay in Shadows Generations was really innovative for what Sonic is doing. It really made you feel that you were actually using chaos control, but still in complete control. I mean, the game was really easy to control in the Shadow mode. On top of that, the open world feel of even the hub was a great addition, and Shadow's solo story was something that was very emotional and had a lot of touch and personality to it that I think we need moving forward in more Sonic games. So another game that makes my honorable mentions list is The Sims. Not specifically The Sims on GameCube, this is just the only physical I owned. However, I think that The Sims has been a great series. It's one that is really easy for anybody to get into. It's a really nice comfort game. I believe that The Sims 2 and 3 were my favorites personally and would have made this list. I think I'm ready to see what the Switch 2 brings, because if the mouse functionality is true and that's what we're getting, I believe that it could bring a lot of cozy gamers over to the Switch 2 and just give us that much more of diversity on that platform, which is something that we really need to make it a better platform. On top of that, I love games where creativity is the main staple point, and with The Sims, you get creativity to the fullest extension. You get to create people, go throughout their lives, and make them live lives that you wanted to live yourself. I think that is one of the coolest things The Sims does, which is why it makes my honorable mentions list. Now, the last game I'm gonna bring up in my honorable mentions list real quick is Terraria. This is another great indie game. It's kind of similar to Minecraft, and if you like Minecraft, I believe that you would honestly really enjoy this. Think of a sandbox game, kind of like Minecraft, but a 2D side-scroll kind of experience to where there is tons of weapons, tons of pets, more bosses, more enemies, more friendly people, and even villagers in this game that just add to the experience that it has. I believe that this is one of those games that is like Minecraft where you can express your creativity, but it has a little bit more of a story to it and a little bit more of a progression to it. So if you like games that have a progression and want you to go in a certain direction, then I think Terraria is honestly a game for you. Alright, here are number 2 and number 1. Okay, so when I reveal what number 2 is, it's really going to reveal what number 1 is. This is one of the games that I actually did not start out on the Switch, but on the 3DS and recently on the Nintendo 64, and that would be The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Now, this game to me holds a lot of sentimental value, and I found it at a time that I just needed to in life. This was one of the first games that I really completed all by myself, and this is the first game that I 100%ed all by myself. I think that this is one of the greatest stories in games. You've heard that I love the storytelling that games can represent and tell. I think video games are a special form of media because they can tell games that no other forms of media can. It can really put you in the center of the story. I just love this story as a game. This story really is a misfit boy who must stop this evil Lord Ganondorf and save the world. And the story always felt to me like a boy who was forced to grow up and face the evils of the world, and a boy who was kind of robbed of his childhood, and I think that that's something that a lot of people can relate to. It's really a tragedy in that sense. However, the game tells it so well. When you're a boy, the world is so young and vibrant and colorful and beautiful, and there's so much to do in it. However, after the time travel, when you get the Master Sword, you see that the world has shifted since Ganondorf has taken over, and it is now an evil and ugly looking place that it is your job to save. I think something with this was just that they had a ton of lovable and really good characters that all had their own culture to them. I think the Gorons were really lovable, with the whole dance scene as one of my favorites in this game. The Gerudos were very unique and stylistic. I think it was this cool idea to have this tough race of all women characters that were just jumping you the second you got in and telling you you weren't welcome. Those levels felt kind of very spy and espionage to me, and I think that was something that made this game unique. I mean, even the Kokiri had their own personalities, and I think that that was something that really helped build Link's story, was all these other characters that got introduced into one, and eventually him having to unite all of Hyrule and all these different cultures and ethnicities and characters into defeating Ganon to do what's best for the world. I think this game just told a story that is really timeless, and this game is something that'll stand the test of time 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 years from now, which is why it's one of my favorites. It's one game that I think that everybody should try at least once in their life if you enjoy video games, and I will always be an Ocarina of Time fan. Alright, so with me telling you that number 2 is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I think that it was obvious what number 1 is. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, when this game came out, I had yet to get a Switch, so I remember just having to watch all my friends play it and being so jealous. But when I finally got my hands on this game, it changed my view of what a video game could be. Unlike most of the other games, you start this game already defeated. Ganon turned the Guardians against you. The Guardians in this game are this mechanical being that you train and turn on your side to defeat this coming threat that you know will be here any second now in the form of Calamity Ganon. Well, the big twist of the game was that he turns the Guardians against you and wipes out a bunch of the Hyrulean people. It's a giant massacre. You're almost killed in this situation until Zelda saves you and puts you to rest for 100 years, in which you wake up with memory loss. You don't really know what's going on. All you know is that you go outside and the world is in complete ruins, and it is your job to save it. Throughout the gameplay though, you end up helping the people that are left in Hyrule and making their lives a better place and a safer place. You end up uncorrupting and helping these giant mechanized machines called Divine Beasts, and these are giant weapons that are meant to help kill Ganondorf, which the greatest thing about this is all this is optional. You don't have to do any of this. This is all kind of a freedom of choice thing. If you don't want to go and tame these Divine Beasts, you don't have to, but there is a reward for you if you end up committing to it and freeing these beasts. I think one of the better parts of this game is throughout your exploration of the game and throughout continuing the story is you unlock your hidden memories that you forgot when you were in that 100-year sleep, and it really builds the world and the story of what happened and what went wrong 100 years ago. And I think all of that honestly puts Link back in the underdog seat. I don't think he's been in that seat for a while, and I think this game really does a good job at showing why he's best an underdog. It really feels like a one-man against the world situation, which makes you feel just so badass and incredible for doing all the feats that you do in this game. And it just makes the ending that much more satisfying when you end up finally defeating Ganon and freeing the world of his grasp. And the biggest thing about Breath of the Wild is that this game was so expansive and really just allowed for as much freedom as possible. You could do whatever you wanted as Link. If you saw a giant mountain, you'd climb on top of it. Once you got up there, if you wanted to jump off and just glide down, you could. You could jump off and use your shield as a skateboard and skate down the mountain. You could swim, you could tame wildlife like deer, bears, of course horses. I mean, you could explore every part of this expansive world, and the best part is you got rewarded for it. There were hidden chests, clothes, weapons, anything that you could think of, you could find at some part of this world, which really just gave you that much more initiative to explore it. I think one of the coolest parts about exploring this world is there's a town that you don't even have to go to for any of the story that is on one of the coasts. I didn't even know about it my first time playing through. When I found it, I just remember being absolutely shocked that it was there, and I never ran through it, never really had a main quest that brought me there. It's just been existing this whole time. I think that Breath of the Wild really shows what a little bit of creativity can do to a series that has kind of been the same since its beginning, and I think that this series has a very bright future ahead of it because Breath of the Wild, and I don't think the Switch would be where it is today without Breath of the Wild, and quite frankly, I don't think my love of video games would be as strong as it is today without Breath of the Wild. That is why it is my favorite game. All right, so those were my favorite games, and I'd love to hear more about your favorite games. Tell me games that you loved, games that I had that you agreed with or disagreed with. And thank you very much for listening, and I will see you guys next time.